Modern SEO is similar to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics, with Sante Achille. Brought to you by Majestic. I'm David Bain, and this is SEO in 2022. Sante, what is your number one SEO tip for 2022?
Well, I would say be very wary about relying too much on what reporting, as far as reporting is concerned, in your rankings and your performance. When I actually thought about what the best tip would be, I had this idea that came back to me from a long time ago, unfortunately now, when I studied chemistry. And the principle of Heisenberg was one of the first things in one of the very first pages of a very thick inorganic chemistry book that sort of like lays the foundation of modern chemistry and how matter is actually built from a very, very high level and simplistic way of looking at things. The old theory thought, of atoms and the whole structure of electrons rotating around the nucleus, etc. Heisenberg disrupted that with his principle of indetermination, and basically stated, put the foundations of modern chemistry in a way that it's not possible to predict exactly the state, the position, and the momentum of your little bits and pieces of matter. Let's say, I hope there are no chemical engineers or around, because they'll kill me for this. But I think there's a lot of similarity in this, in what is happening. It has been happening more and more, and will happen more and more in the future for SEO, because there's a lot of there's an extensive use of tools that give you predictions. They give you reports on what your performance are in terms of your position, etc. And that is really not. I wouldn't. I tend to be reluctant to use that kind of information, and I try to stick as much as possible to whatever Search Console comes back with, which is although it's not the entire amount, let's say, of information, because it's only a portion of what is actually happening. But it is a significant order of magnitude of what is happening, where your site is, who it is being presented to, under what form, and with which kind of queries your pages are actually being surfaced. They're surfacing in the search engine results pages. And so that can give you an idea of who is looking for them, or better, what is the intent of the people that are looking for pages that are similar to yours, and so where you are, how close you are to that kind of question, that kind of need that people are looking for, how close you are to solving someone's problem. But it is always a very unpredictable kind of situation. So you're flying blind more and more, I think, is the right way of looking at it, as you're doing this kind of thing. So it's more of trying to understand where you are, what you are, what you have to offer, and trying to understand the needs of the people that potentially are looking for you. It was much easier earlier on, I would think, because it was easier to actually say, that I'm here on these SERPs, and I can actually see myself, and I can see myself across a number of browsers in different locations, which is literally impossible at the moment. It's just hop on any proxy, move around from one location of another in the same country, or just change browser, be logged in, not be logged in, and you'll see completely different sets of results. So it is indeed too simple to say I have a certain kind of position or certain ranking. I think at the end of the day, we have to rely more and more on performance, results, business transactions, contexts, etc., to guide us, rather than looking at positions.
I think most SEOs will be aware of Heisenberg as a character in Breaking Bad, but perhaps not who he originally was and what he originally did, although there's an inkling of that from the series, of course. But that's taking a bit of a sidetrack. What I was thinking in relation to what you're saying is it makes it very difficult for an SEO to, first of all, explain their thinking to a non-technical marketer, and then secondly, forecast the financial value of some SEO activity in the future. So what does what you're saying mean for SEO forecasting, and how can an SEO, given what you're saying, actually predictably measure what the financial outcome or result of doing some SEO activity is likely to be?
That is indeed it's very challenging because let's say doing real, real intense or advanced, sophisticated kind of SEO is goes beyond most people. I mean, if you venture off into doing things and looking at natural language programming and just scratching the surface of what rankings actually entail in terms of what the mathematics that are behind the rankings and how words actually become numbers, that is it's very it actually changes the way you look at the entire activity, because when words are no longer words and they become numbers, they're in a different space. It's a different league. We're talking about something that's a matrix of zeros and ones and sparse matrices and principal components and eigenvalues and these kind of things, and that is so that needs to remain under the carpet, let's say. So you cannot talk to normal people like the majority of human beings with this language. So it is indeed a challenge because they don't understand it, and it gets actually quite frightening. It can get quite frightening and intimidating for many. And the other problem is that it is, again, totally unpredictable. The time lag that it can actually take for the results to actually surface. So I've very, very, very recently had a sort of like a bad experience with a client that totally went freaked out because they thought that I was taking advantage of them and that I was telling them a lot of nonsense, and that I wasn't really doing, and that I wasn't going to deliver. And it took a couple of months for the first results to come through. And then when the problem is that crossing the desert, so to speak, waiting for the results to come along. But then once they do come along, they realize how this kind of how real quality SEO can actually change the course of events for an enterprise.
Yeah.
So actually, explaining it is very something that has to be really processed depending on the person that is really sitting in front of you. And it can be quite even more challenging than doing the technical SEO.
I guess the first stage is for the SEO to truly understand what you're sharing here. And one element that you touched upon is that ranking and performance are stochastic variables. So what does that mean?
Where let's say that stochastic variables are we could say that they are equivalent to random elements. So it is a process that is not by any means under our control, and there is basically no recognizable pattern that we can actually follow to identify a strategy that can fulfill the objective. So there is a slight difference between these, let's say, the more purely mathematical terminology of stochastic, but for the majority of the people who are joining in, and even for myself, I am not a mathematician. I'm an engineer. I studied engineering, and I worked for the aerospace industry for about 8 years before I changed completely. So my approach to modeling and mathematics has always been one very practical and less theoretical, although I have always been a fan of mathematics and modeling, but using the tools to a purpose and not for the sake of studying the tools themselves, you see.
I mean, I started SEO a fairly long time ago, probably not as long ago as you. About 2004 I started. And back when I started, you could do relatively simple things like submit articles with an author bio with a keyword-rich link back, and you'd get a lot of traffic back from the ranking increases for those keyword phrases. And they were easy to measure, and it was obvious what caused the SEO, the improvement. Now, from what you're saying, is it's almost impossible to measure what's causing what to happen and to predict the outcome that you're going to get. Are you, in essence, saying that one of the best things for SEO to do nowadays is simply just to deliver a wonderful user experience and try to oversee great content that's relevant to users at the right stage in the user journey in order to get the machines to understand that you're actually delivering a wonderful, relevant, appropriate experience to people and therefore should be ranked highly?
I'm not one to believe the fairy tale that the wonderful experience will deliver great value for the user, and therefore it will you will magically float to the top of the search results pages because you are out there to fulfill with a philanthropic approach this mission to make people feel wonderful. Doesn't work like that. There is a lot of there can be a lot of science behind the way you approach. There are many ways that you can actually do SEO. I'd like the orders of magnitude are what typically count to make sure, or let's say to guarantee in quotes, that you will you can actually fulfill the objective of providing quality traffic at a steady state, constantly, on-site and off-site. So off-site, your backlinks, if you are good at developing a strategy, writing the right content to attract good backlinks, and using tools like Majestic to actually analyze your own performance of your competitors. Try to identify strategies that can find the right opportunity for those very rewarding editorial backlinks. And that is definitely one strategy that is and probably will remain to be very, very rewarding. because backlinks might lose their, let's say, their propelling force in terms of a ranking factor. But it is a fact that if you have good links from good websites, they will send you quality traffic. On-site, I think it is a matter of, I have seen over time how the way you actually build a page can have a big impact. So one thing that I would definitely suggest is to pay a lot of attention on the use of images, using enough images, using the right images, having images with the right name. People don't like to use images very much because, or they use them not in the best way, because it's very time consuming to write a piece and include the right images with a caption, with a title, with an alt tag, to have them describe the right thing, have the name of the image be the right name, and then combining the right elements of intent. So it's less and less about specific keywords. It's more and more about topics around which people search, and for you to be there with your content and be able to exactly pinpoint for a certain query that people put into the search engines what they're specifically after. So determining the right combination of topics. Now those topics can be combined in a different way, in different ways. The keywords that are related to those topics can be combined in different ways. It's not so much an issue of keyword, and it's more and more an issue of topics that are then illustrated, described, and enforced throughout the copy with those specific keywords.
That's some very actionable tips, tactics that SEOs can follow there. I love how we started off with the big picture, and this is how you see the SEO operating nowadays. But we're moving into something very actionable, which is great. I'd just like to finish off by actually asking your opinion on something that SEOs shouldn't be doing anymore, because SEO has been around for over 20 years now. What's something that SEOs have been doing on a regular basis for the last maybe 5 or 10 years that they just should stop doing now, because it doesn't work as well now, it's not as relevant now, and there's better things that they can be doing with their time?
I see. I follow a few feeds just to I keep in touch with what people are saying, etc. And I think that if you want to succeed, you need to be less attached to. I think people are too focused on very small, minor details, and they chase ghosts that really don't exist. I read something extremely amusing a few days ago. Questions that people ask Mueller about things. Now I forget the exact question, but it's things like they give me the idea that the people look at, as the Germans say, people look at the tree, but they miss the forest. You see, they're very focused and concentrated on trying to pinpoint small details in the context of an article, but then miss the big picture of trying to, for example, go on to, before writing an article, just going on to Google and analyzing the top 15 relevant pages, excluding the Wikipedias and the 800-pound gorillas that might be around, that are there because of their brand or because they're Wikipedia. But just looking at other ones and trying to understand what they have done and what kind of problem they're trying to solve, and trying to combine these concepts in a meaningful and optimized fashion. I think that's the thing. Fuss less about what others are doing, fuss less about the minor details, look at the bigger picture, and then just dive into your own search console. I think people overlook a lot what is in Search Console. You can do wonderful things with the information that is in Search Console just by looking at combining with the API that Google allows you to use. You can combine with a pivot table your URL and all of the keywords or the search terms, that Google has associated to that URL. And that is that is what you should really be looking at, not fussing about minor details of whether I have 2 images or 3, or if it's at the top or if it's at the bottom or if it's in the menu, or these kind of things. They really don't make much sense.
Great advice, very thought-provoking, and I'm sure that many SEOs will be listening to this episode multiple times. You can find Sante Achille over at achille.name, and that's spelled ACHILLE.name. Sante, thanks for being part of SEO in 2022.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Check out the rest of the content from SEO in 2022 over at SEOin2022.com.